I walked into the grocery store, my heart a little lighter, ready to get a few items for dinner. But I wasn't prepared for what happened next. As I walked down the aisles, I could hear the sound of my daughter-in-law's voice, a sharp, mocking tone cutting through the air. "Look at her, still shopping like she's living in the past. I don't know why she can't just move on with the times," Cassandra said, loud enough for me to hear. My steps faltered for a moment, but I kept walking, pretending I hadn't heard her. It wasn't the first time she'd said something like this. Over the years, I'd learned to ignore her jabs, to smile and pretend that it didn't hurt. After all, she was my son's wife, and I wasn't about to cause a scene. Still, her words stung. I walked past her without a glance, my gaze fixed on the shelves ahead of me. I could feel her eyes on my back, watching, waiting for me to react. But I didn't. I simply carried on with my shopping, the weight of her words hanging in the air like a thick fog. As I turned the corner, I couldn't help but think about the years I'd spent raising my son, the sacrifices I'd made, and the way Cassandra had slowly woven herself into our lives, pushing me out little by little. She always seemed to have an opinion about everything I did, everything I said. It was as if I didn't matter anymore. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't just another old woman in the store. I wasn't just someone to be pushed around, to be mocked. As I reached the checkout line, I saw the cashier smile warmly at me. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Harper. How's your day going?" I smiled back, appreciating the small kindness. Cassandra, who was standing a few feet away, must have heard the cashier's greeting because she immediately turned her head, her expression shifting to one of confusion. "Mrs. Harper?" she repeated, as if she couldn't quite place who I was. I saw the realization slowly dawning on her face, the awkward pause that followed. "Oh, don't tell me you've never heard of me," I said, casually placing my items on the conveyor belt. "I'm the owner of this store." For a moment, there was complete silence. Cassandra's eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing as if she were trying to find the right words. The arrogance that had marked her tone earlier vanished in an instant. The cashier, still smiling, gave me a polite nod as I finished paying. As I grabbed my bags, I turned to Cassandra, who was still standing there speechless. "I'm sorry, did you need something else?" I asked, my voice calm and steady. Cassandra stammered something incoherent, but I wasn't really listening anymore. I knew what she was thinking. She'd probably never expected that I was the one who had the power here. She thought she could insult me, belittle me, and get away with it. But now she knew that I wasn't someone to be dismissed so easily. I could feel a small, quiet victory stirring inside me, but I didn't show it. I simply picked up my bags and walked out of the store, leaving Cassandra to stew in her embarrassment. As I stepped into my car, I let out a long breath, the weight of the day slowly lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the store or the money, it was about reclaiming my dignity. I may have been getting older, but I wasn't invisible. I wasn't weak. I had earned everything I had, and no one was going to take that away from me. Not even Cassandra. I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted after the incident at the grocery store. The moment I walked out of those doors, my mind replayed Cassandra's face over and over again. She hadn't expected me to own the store. No one ever did. But it wasn't just about the shock of the reveal. It was the power I'd regained, the strength that had been buried under years of insults, neglect, and quiet suffering. I had been overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed for so long, but now the tables had turned. As I drove home, I couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet pride. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't shouted in anger. Instead, I'd calmly taken back control of the situation, and Cassandra was left speechless, humiliated in her own way. It was the first time in a long time that I had felt like I mattered. As the days passed, I found myself thinking about the years of struggle, the way I had been made to feel small in my own family. I had always been the one to give, to sacrifice, to put my son and daughter-in-law's needs above my own. But it was never enough. They had always treated me as if I were invisible, as if my worth was tied to my ability to serve them. I had spent years living in their shadow, quietly accepting their criticism and dismissiveness. But now, with just a few words and a subtle reveal, I had changed everything. I started to realize that I wasn't the only one who had been hurt by this dynamic. My son, Jack, had always been a good person, but he had been pulled into Cassandra's world. She had wrapped him around her finger, controlling him with her manipulation and her cold, calculated words. Over the years, I had watched him slowly drift away, becoming more distant and more disconnected from me. He had become a stranger, a man who no longer saw me as his mother, but as an inconvenience. At times, I wondered if he even cared about me at all. And then there was Cassandra, who had always been more than willing to push me aside to get what she wanted. It was as if I were nothing more than a nuisance in their lives, a reminder of the past that didn't fit into their shiny, perfect world. I had accepted that for so long. But no more. I realized that I had been holding on to a version of my son that no longer existed. The person he had become was someone who valued wealth, status, and power more than family. He had been swept away by the allure of Cassandra's manipulation, and in the process, I had been forgotten. But not anymore. As I thought about all of this, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to come to me. I wasn't going to beg for their attention or their respect. If they wanted me, they would have to earn it. I wasn't going to continue to be their doormat. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, to let them treat me like this. I had a life of my own, and I was going to live it on my own terms. The next time I saw Cassandra, I wasn't going to just smile and walk away. No, I was going to stand my ground. I was going to make sure she knew exactly who I was, and that I wasn't someone she could walk all over anymore. I wasn't just a quiet old woman living in the background. I was Mildred Harper, the owner of the grocery store, the woman who had built everything she had with her own 2 hands. And I was done being silent. As the days went on, I could feel the shift in the air. The tension between Cassandra and me was palpable, but I didn't care. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I wasn't afraid of anyone. I had spent too many years being afraid, too many years allowing others to dictate my life. Now I was in control, and it felt good. The next time I saw my son and daughter-in-law, I would make sure they knew that I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't just a shadow in their lives anymore. I was standing tall, and I was ready to fight for the respect I deserved. I wasn't going to be overlooked again. I had never been one for confrontation, but that day something inside me shifted. I couldn't ignore the way things had been for so long, the way they treated me, the way they belittled me, the way Cassandra always thought she had the right to push me around. As the days passed, the feeling that had begun in the grocery store grew stronger. It was time to stand up for myself. It was time to show them that I wasn't just some elderly woman living quietly in the background. No, I was Mildred Harper, and I deserved respect. The next morning, I decided to visit the store again. I wanted to be sure that I had the same control over my life that I had over the business I had built. When I arrived, I noticed a few things that caught my attention. The employees greeted me with warmth, which was something I hadn't always felt in the past. It was as if they knew that I was more than just a face behind the counter. I walked through the aisles, taking in the familiar surroundings. The bright lights, the carefully stocked shelves, the smell of fresh produce. This place had been my life's work. It was hard to believe that just a few years ago, I had been so caught up in family drama and pain that I had forgotten how much this store meant to me. I had built this from nothing, worked day and night to turn it into something special. It wasn't just a business, it was a testament to my hard work, my dedication, my resilience. As I walked through the store, I couldn't help but think about the people who had tried to tear me down. Cassandra, with her sharp words and her constant criticism. Jack, my son, who had allowed her to control him. They didn't understand what I had gone through, what it had taken to get here. They didn't understand the sacrifices I had made to provide for them, to build a future for them, only to be pushed aside when they no longer needed me. But I was done with that. I wasn't going to let them treat me like that anymore. I had worked too hard, and I had earned the right to be respected. As I approached the front counter, I saw Cassandra standing there, chatting with one of the employees. Her eyes met mine, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something, surprise, maybe even a little guilt. But I didn't let it show. I didn't give her the satisfaction of seeing how much her words had hurt me. Instead, I walked right up to her, my posture straight, my voice calm. "Cassandra, I need to speak with you," I said. She turned to face me, her smile faltering slightly. "What's going on, Mildred?" she asked, clearly trying to sound casual. But I could see the tension in her eyes. She knew this wasn't just another friendly conversation. "I just wanted to let you know that I've had enough," I said, my voice steady. "I'm tired of being disrespected by you and Jack. I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. I'm done." For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just stood there, looking at me like she didn't know how to respond. But I wasn't done. "I'm not going to be pushed aside anymore. I built this store, and I'm proud of it. And I'm not going to let you or anyone else take that away from me." The silence between us stretched out for a few seconds, and then, slowly, I saw her face change. The arrogance that had once defined her was gone, replaced by something more vulnerable. She opened her mouth to say something, but I held up a hand, silencing her. "You don't need to say anything, Cassandra. I don't need your apology. I just need you to understand that I'm not the same woman I used to be. And I'm not going to let you walk all over me anymore." I turned and walked away, not looking back. As I left the store, I could feel a weight lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just about Cassandra or Jack. It was about me. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my self-worth. I had spent so many years letting others dictate my life, letting them make me feel small, letting them convince me that I didn't matter. But no more. I wasn't going to live in their shadow any longer. I was going to live for myself on my terms. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but I was ready for it. I had fought too hard to get where I was, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that away from me. I hadn't expected the peace I felt after the confrontation at the grocery store to last. The next few days were filled with silence, but it was a different kind of silence. It wasn't the uncomfortable kind I had been used to for years, the kind where every word felt like a hidden barb, every look a silent judgment. No, this silence felt empowering. It felt like I had finally taken control of my life, and no one could take that from me. But things with Cassandra were far from resolved. She had tried to reach out several times, sending me texts, calling me, but I ignored every attempt. I didn't want her empty apologies. I didn't need her to tell me she was sorry. I needed her to understand the truth. I wasn't someone she could trample on anymore. One evening, a week after our encounter in the store, I received a call from Jack. My son. His voice was softer than usual when he spoke. "Mom, can we talk? I know you're upset, but I need to understand what happened." I could hear the concern in his voice, but I also heard the edge of frustration, as if he wasn't sure who to side with. I felt the familiar weight in my chest, the weight that had been there every time Jack and I had tried to talk about anything real. Over the years, I had learned that he wasn't the same person he used to be. He had changed, molded by Cassandra's influence. I had spent so many years just trying to hold on to the idea of the son I had raised. But now, I knew I couldn't keep living in the past. The man on the other end of the phone wasn't the boy I had raised. "Jack," I said, my voice steady but firm. "I don't need you to understand what happened. What I need is for you to stop treating me like I'm invisible." There was a long pause. "Mom," he finally said, sounding worn out. "I don't understand why you're doing this. You're my mother. I've always tried to be there for you." Always tried. The words echoed in my mind. I had always tried to be there for him too. But where had that gotten me? He wasn't there for me when I needed him. He wasn't there when I was being pushed aside, ignored, belittled. He wasn't there when Cassandra took over his life, and with it mine. "Jack," I repeated, this time softer. "I know you think you're doing the right thing, but you're not. You've let her control everything. And I can't stand by and watch it happen anymore." The silence on the other end of the line was heavy. I could hear the gears turning in his mind. He didn't want to believe me, didn't want to accept the truth. But the truth was there, staring him in the face. I wasn't the problem. I wasn't the one who had caused this divide. I need time to think, Mom, he said. I'm not sure what to do. I let out a sigh, the exhaustion of the conversation settling in my bones. You've had time, Jack. You've had plenty of time. And you've made your choice. I'm not asking you to choose between me and her. I'm asking you to see me. To see what she's doing to this family. I heard him breathe in deeply. I'll think about it, he said quietly before hanging up. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the years I had spent trying to hold everything together. I had given everything to my family, but in return, they had taken me for granted. And the worst part was that I had let them. But not anymore. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of clarity I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't going to keep waiting for Jack to come around. I wasn't going to keep hoping that someday he would remember what it meant to be a family. No, I was going to move forward, and I was going to do it on my own terms. I wasn't going to beg for his attention. I wasn't going to beg for Cassandra's approval. They had both made it clear that they didn't respect me, and I wasn't going to keep trying to prove my worth to them. I had a life to live, and it was time for me to start living it. That afternoon, I drove to the store again, but this time, I was different. I walked through the aisles with a sense of purpose, not for anyone else but for me. The store had always been my pride, my hard work, my legacy. And today, it felt like it was finally mine again. When I got home, I took a moment to appreciate the small things, the warmth of the sun streaming through the windows, the quiet of the house, the peace that had settled inside me. It wasn't going to be easy. I knew that. But I also knew that I was strong enough to handle whatever came next. I had spent too many years putting everyone else's needs above my own. Now it was my turn. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away from me. I spent the next few days quietly reflecting on everything that had happened. Cassandra's insults, Jack's silence, and my own reaction to it all. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself. I didn't feel the need to defend my worth to anyone. It had taken a long time, but I had finally realized that I didn't need to seek approval anymore. I wasn't living for them, I was living for myself. That morning, I woke up early, as usual. The house was still and quiet, and for a moment, I just sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the peaceful silence. It felt like a fresh start. A new chapter. The air outside was crisp, and as I opened the window, the cool breeze seemed to carry away all the frustration and disappointment I had been holding on to for so long. I knew I had made the right decision. It wasn't going to be easy. I still loved Jack, still wanted to believe that there was some part of him that hadn't been consumed by Cassandra's manipulations. But I couldn't keep living in the shadow of that hope, waiting for things to change. It was time for me to take control. Later that afternoon, I received a call from my niece, Claire. She was always the one person in the family who seemed to understand me, who saw through the facades everyone else put on. "Aunt Mildred, how are you doing?" she asked, her voice warm and genuine. I smiled, feeling a small flicker of comfort in her words. "I'm doing well, Claire. Better than I have in a long time," I said, feeling the truth of it as the words left my mouth. "I'm glad to hear that. Listen, I know things have been difficult with Jack and Cassandra, but I just wanted you to know that I'm here for you. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to call." Her words were simple, but they meant the world to me. It was the kind of support I hadn't received from anyone else in a long time, and it reminded me that I still had people in my life who cared for me, who respected me. "Thank you, Claire. I appreciate that more than you know," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You don't have to go through this alone," she added. "Family isn't just about blood, and Mildred. It's about who stands by you, who supports you when you need it most." Her words struck a chord in me, and for the first time in a while, I felt a sense of hope. Maybe family wasn't just about those who were closest to you by blood. Maybe it was about the ones who showed up when it mattered, who didn't take you for granted, who truly saw you for who you were. Later that week, I decided to visit the store again. I had been there every day since the incident, but today felt different. It wasn't just about checking on the business, it was about reclaiming my space, reaffirming that I wasn't just a visitor in my own life. As I walked through the store, I noticed the familiar faces of the employees, each one greeting me with respect, with warmth. I felt a sense of pride, knowing that I had built something from nothing, that I had created a place where people could come and feel welcome. It wasn't just about the money, it wasn't just about the business, it was about the legacy I had created with my own hands. And in that moment I knew I had something to be proud of. As I made my way through the aisles, I bumped into one of the regular customers, Mrs. Duvall. She was an older woman, someone I had known for years, and she always made a point of stopping to chat whenever she saw me. "Mildred, you're looking well," she said, her eyes twinkling with kindness. "I heard about what happened with that daughter-in-law of yours. I have to say, I admire your strength." Her words were simple, but they felt like a validation I hadn't expected. It was as if the whole world wasn't against me, as if there were people who saw me for who I truly was, who respected me for what I had accomplished. "Thank you, Mrs. Duvall," I said, my voice steady. "It's been a rough few weeks, but I'm getting through it. I've learned that sometimes the best thing you can do is walk away from things that don't serve you." "Wise words," she replied with a knowing smile. "You've got a lot of strength in you, Mildred. Don't ever let anyone take that away from you." Her words echoed in my mind as I walked back to my car. Maybe I hadn't had the support I wanted from my son, or from Cassandra, but I had something else, something far more valuable. I had my own strength. I had my own power. And no one could take that from me. The sun was beginning to set as I drove home, the sky painted in shades of orange and pink. It was a quiet moment, a peaceful moment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly at peace with myself. I knew there was still a long road ahead of me. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt. But I was no longer afraid. I was no longer waiting for someone else to change. I was ready to move forward, to live my life on my terms. And no one, not even Cassandra, could take that away from me. I spent the next few days in a kind of peaceful solitude. The world outside seemed to keep moving at its usual pace, but I was no longer tethered to it the way I once had been. There was something liberating about knowing that I didn't have to prove myself anymore. I didn't have to win anyone's approval. I had finally realized that I could live for myself. And that realization gave me a sense of freedom I hadn't felt in years. I woke up that morning feeling more determined than ever. The store was still my pride, my legacy, but now it was also my sanctuary, a place where I could find some semblance of control in a world that had often tried to strip that from me. As I drove there, I thought about how much had changed in the past few weeks. It wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about me, about my journey from feeling invisible to finally recognizing my own worth. When I arrived, I noticed that the usual rhythm of the store had already begun. Employees were unpacking deliveries, customers were browsing, and the familiar hum of activity filled the air. But today, everything felt different. I wasn't just another face among the crowd. I was the one who had built this place, the one who had given everything to make sure it succeeded. I had a sense of purpose now that I hadn't felt before. As I walked through the aisles, I noticed a few people giving me curious glances, perhaps wondering why I was here so early, but I didn't let it bother me. I wasn't here for their approval. I was here to remind myself of my strength. I walked past the bakery section and saw a young woman putting out fresh loaves of bread. She looked up at me and smiled warmly. "Good morning, Mrs. Harper. The new batch just came in," she said with a smile. It was such a simple exchange, but it made me realize how much I had overlooked in the past. There was kindness in the small moments, in the interactions with people who didn't judge. You, who saw you for who you really were. I smiled back and nodded. "Thank you. It looks great," I said. The rest of the day passed in a blur of routine tasks, checking stock, helping customers, making sure everything ran smoothly. It wasn't just about managing the store anymore. It was about reclaiming the part of me that had been buried under years of resentment and neglect. I was doing what I loved again, and it felt right. By the time the evening rolled around, I felt accomplished. The day had been long, but it had been satisfying. As I sat in my car, ready to head home, I glanced at the store once more. It was more than just a place of business to me. It was where I had poured my heart and soul, and now it was my refuge. I could still hear the quiet buzz of activity in my mind, the sound of my hard work paying off. It was the sound of my freedom. That night, as I sat down to a quiet dinner alone, I thought about my family. My son, Jack, had still not called, and I didn't expect him to. But something had changed within me. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't waiting for their validation, for their approval, for them to finally see me. I had learned that I didn't need anyone else to feel whole. I was enough. And as I finished my meal, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. It wasn't just about the store, or the money, or the legacy. It was about finding peace within myself. It was about finally taking control of my own story. The road ahead would still have its challenges, of course. I knew that. But now, I faced them with a sense of purpose, with a sense of who I was, and that made all the difference. The next day, as I walked into the store, I knew that the battle was far from over. There would be more challenges, more difficult conversations, but I was ready for them. Because for the first time in a long time, I knew who I was. And that was enough. I had always believed that family, at its core, should be about love, respect, and support. But the events of the past few weeks had shattered that belief, leaving me questioning everything. I thought I knew about my son, my daughter-in-law, and even myself. I spent the following days thinking about how I had gotten here, how I had allowed them to push me aside for so long. It wasn't just about the store anymore. It wasn't even just about the insults. It was about realizing that my place in their world was no longer guaranteed. They had taken so much from me, and yet I had kept giving. I had always put them first, and I realized now that I had been doing it at the cost of my own happiness. But something had changed. I had changed. I wasn't going to keep being the person they expected me to be, the quiet, invisible woman in the background. I wasn't going to be their doormat anymore. That afternoon, I went back to the store. The sense of pride I had felt when I first walked through those doors was still there, but now it felt different. It felt like my space, my domain. I wasn't just a part of the business. I was the one who had built it, the one who had fought to keep it alive. As I made my way through the aisles, I couldn't help but notice how people were looking at me differently. Maybe it was the way I carried myself now, or maybe they were finally beginning to see me as I truly was, a strong, capable woman who had earned her place. The employees greeted me with respect, some even offering small compliments, but it wasn't about their approval. It was about how I felt in that moment, empowered, confident, unshaken. I walked up to the front counter, where the cashier was ringing up a customer. When she saw me, her face lit up with a smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Harper," she said warmly. I nodded in response, feeling a sense of satisfaction in the familiarity of it all. It was comforting to know that, despite everything that had happened, I still had this. This was mine. And nothing was going to take that from me. As I stood there, I couldn't help but think about Cassandra. She had been so sure of herself, so certain that I was nothing more than a relic of the past. But she hadn't seen me for who I truly was. She hadn't seen the woman who had worked tirelessly for years to build something meaningful. The woman who had survived the hardest of times and still stood tall. I wasn't the weak old woman she thought I was. I wasn't going to let her or anyone else tell me my worth. As I continued walking through the store, I saw Jack's car parked outside. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't let it stop me. I wasn't going to let him have the power to dictate my emotions anymore. I walked past his car without a second glance, knowing that he wasn't the person I thought he was. He had chosen his path, and I had to accept that. But I was no longer waiting for him to come back to me. I wasn't going to wait for him to see me, to realize what he had lost. If he couldn't see the woman standing in front of him, then that was on him, not me. I spent the rest of the afternoon in the store, making small adjustments to the displays, checking the inventory, and even chatting with some of the regular customers. It was a normal day at work, but for me, it felt like so much more. It felt like reclaiming my life, like taking back the power I had given away for so long. By the time I left, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in years. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't hurt. I had let go of all the things that had been holding me back. When I got home, I sat on the porch for a while, watching the sun set, feeling the weight of the past few weeks slowly lift. I didn't have all the answers, and I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. It wasn't about revenge or anger. It was about taking control of my life, about choosing to live on my terms. And I was ready for whatever came next. I spent the following days in a state of quiet reflection. The events of the past few weeks had unsettled me, but in a way, they had also set me free. I had stood up for myself, and though the road ahead was uncertain, I no longer felt like a bystander in my own life. The realization that I had the power to choose how I lived, how I was treated, gave me a sense of peace that I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't about getting revenge on Cassandra or Jack. It wasn't about winning their approval. It was about reclaiming my own strength, my own sense of self-worth. That afternoon, I decided to visit the store once again. As I walked through the aisles, I noticed the familiar faces of my employees, each one offering a small greeting, a smile, nod. It was such a simple thing, but it meant the world to me. These were the people who respected me for who I was, not for what I could give them, but for the work I had put into building something that mattered. I walked to the back office, where I had spent countless hours over the years, managing the store, making decisions, solving problems. I paused for a moment, looking around. This room had been the heart of the business, the place where I had fought to keep things running smoothly when others thought it was impossible. It had been my refuge, my safe space, and I had earned every inch of it. As I sat down at the desk, I thought about my son. Jack had still not called, and I had stopped waiting for him to reach out. I had been the one to always make the first move, to always extend the olive branch, but it was clear now that he was lost to me. Cassandra had taken him, and there was no way for me to get him back. But I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't devastated. I had learned to accept that some things couldn't be fixed, and some people couldn't be changed. I wasn't going to let their actions define me anymore. As I turned on the computer to check the store's finances, a sudden thought struck me. I had always been so focused on keeping everything together for everyone else, but now it was time to focus on myself. I wasn't just a mother or a grandmother anymore. I wasn't just a business owner. I was Mildred Harper, a woman who had lived through hardships and come out stronger on the other side. And it was time to start living for me. The next few weeks passed with a sense of calm. I kept running the store. But I no longer felt the weight of the past bearing down on me. I wasn't waiting for Jack's apology, for Cassandra's approval. I was living my life on my terms. The customers who came through the doors of the store noticed the change in me. It was subtle, but it was there. I carried myself with more confidence, with more pride. And as I interacted with the people who came in, I realized something important. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone anymore. I was enough, just as I was. One evening, as I was locking up the store, I heard a car pull into the parking lot. I looked up and saw Jack's familiar car. My heart skipped a beat, but I didn't let it show. I wasn't going to let him have the power to control my emotions anymore. He got out of the car and walked toward me, his expression uncertain, almost apologetic. "Mom," he said, his voice soft. "Can we talk?" I stood there for a moment, looking at him. He was my son, the boy I had raised, but there was a distance between us now, a distance that couldn't be bridged with words. Still, I knew I had to face him. I couldn't keep running from the past. What is it, Jack? I asked, my voice calm but firm. He hesitated, then spoke again. I know I've made mistakes. I know I haven't been there for you, and I'm sorry. I didn't know what to do. Cassandra, she's always been like that. His words sounded rehearsed, like he was trying to say what he thought I wanted to hear. But I didn't need apologies anymore. I didn't need him to explain himself. I had already made my peace with it. Jack, you've made your choice. And so have I said, my voice steady. I've spent too many years trying to make things right, but some things can't be fixed. I can't change what's happened, and I can't change you. But I've changed. I'm not the same woman I used to be. His eyes softened, and for a brief moment, I saw a flicker of the sun I once knew. But I didn't let it sway me. I had spent too many years holding on to the past, waiting for him to return to me. But now, I was the one who had to move forward. I'm proud of you, Jack. I always have been. But I can't keep living in the past. I'm living for me now. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I understand, Mom. I really do. And with that, he turned and walked back to his car. I stood there for a moment longer, watching him leave, and then I turned and locked the store door. The sun was setting, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It wasn't the closure I had once hoped for, but it was enough. I had let go of the past, and I was finally free to move forward. I woke up the next morning with a sense of quiet determination. It had been a week since Jack had come to the store to apologize, and while it wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, it had given me the closure I needed. I was finally free of the emotional weight that had been dragging me down for so long. It wasn't just about letting go of my relationship with Jack, or with Cassandra. It was about letting go of the person I had been, someone who waited for others to change, someone who let her worth be defined by the people around her. I wasn't that woman anymore. I wasn't going to sit around hoping for a change that might never come. I was going to live my life on my own terms. The store had always been my pride and joy, but now it felt even more significant. It wasn't just a business. It was a symbol of my resilience, my hard work, and my ability to overcome. I had built it from the ground up, and no one could take that from me. I walked through the store that morning, taking in the familiar sights, the fresh produce, the neatly arranged shelves, the quiet hum of activity. It was a place that felt like home to me, a place where I had poured my heart and soul for so many years. But it was also a place where I had learned to stand up for myself, to claim my own space, and to take back the power that had always been mine. As I made my way through the aisles, I saw the employees busy with their tasks, each one going about their work with a quiet professionalism. I realized that, in a way, I had come to see them as my family. They were the ones who supported me, who treated me with respect, and who valued the work I had done. They were the ones who saw me for who I really was. I smiled to myself as I passed them, acknowledging their hard work and dedication. It wasn't just about the store anymore. It was about the people who made it what it was, the people who had helped me build something that mattered. I was still the same person, but I wasn't the same person I had been. I had grown stronger, more confident, and more at peace with who I was. That afternoon, I received a call from Claire, my niece. I had always been close to her, and her support had meant the world to me in recent weeks. Aunt Mildred, I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing, she said, her voice full of warmth. I've been thinking about you a lot. I'm doing well, Claire, I said, smiling. Better than I have in a long time. I could hear the relief in her voice. That's so good to hear. You deserve to be happy, Aunt Mildred. I'm glad you're finally putting yourself first. Her words filled me with a sense of gratitude. It wasn't often that people took the time to check in, to really see how I was doing. But Claire had always been there for me, and I knew that I could count on her. Thank you, Claire, I said softly. It's been a long road, but I'm getting there. You're strong, Aunt Mildred, she replied. And I'm proud of you. Her words warmed my heart. I wasn't used to hearing words like that, especially not from my own family. But it felt good, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was on the right path. Later that evening, as I was preparing dinner, I thought about how much had changed. It wasn't just about the store, or the past with my son and daughter-in-law. It was about everything. It was about finding my strength, reclaiming my power, and accepting who I had become. I had been so focused on pleasing others, on making sure everyone around me was happy, that I had forgotten to take care of myself. But now, I was doing just that. I was living my life for me, not for anyone else. And that felt liberating. The next day, as I walked through the store once more, I felt a sense of calm. I wasn't looking for anything or anyone. I was just there, moving through my day, doing the work that I loved. I was no longer waiting for the approval of others. I wasn't waiting for Jack to come back, or for Cassandra to apologize. I was living my own life, and I was finally at peace with that. As I closed the store for the night, I took a deep breath, looking around at the place that had been such a big part of my life. I had built it, I had made it mine, and no one could ever take that from me. I didn't need anyone's approval to feel proud of what I had accomplished. I didn't need anyone's permission to live my life. I had spent so many years giving, sacrificing, and waiting for others to see my worth. But now I knew that my worth had never been in their hands. It had always been in mine. And for the first time in a long time, I was finally living for myself.